If you're a petroleum operator, you know the oil and gas industry is changing fast. You've got to adapt to the future by creating greater efficiency in operations, reducing risk, and designing for a more sustainable future. You also know everything in energy happens somewhere. And since getting location right is so important, turning to Esri gives you the power you need to stay ahead. You get the most advanced capabilities in the industry from the world leader in location technology. With our integrated GIS platform and huge partner network, you have access to groundbreaking solutions and a complete GIS enterprise system. Network management tools with True 3D let you visualize your system the way it looks in the real world and bring your design to life to model and manage emerging renewables. Spatial tools give you a better understanding of your network and assets. Mobile field apps streamline data collection, routing, and navigation. When natural disasters strike, you get real-time monitoring of operations to reduce risks, speed up recovery, and get back to business faster. And you can create a true digital twin of your network to show connections that match the real world. Plus, an open architecture lets you share maps and apps on any device, any system, anywhere, anytime. And with cutting-edge spatial analytics, you can leverage IoT, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to understand the past better and forecast the future more accurately. With Esri location technology, you'll have everything you need to supercharge operational efficiency and diversify to meet growing demands of the future.
Welcome, everyone, to the Downstream session of the 2021 Esri Petroleum User Group meeting. My name is Sumant Malavaram. I'm an account manager on the Natural Resources team based out of San Antonio, Texas. I'll be your host for the next 2 hours as we go through this session. I'm very glad and excited to have you here today, and I hope you have enjoyed the 3 other sessions, including pipelines and operations leading up to this one. I'd like to provide some context on this session first. As we were preparing over the last several weeks, we realized an interesting paradox. The so-called downstream segment in the energy industry is perhaps not as clearly defined as the upstream, which is primarily about exploration and production, or midstream, which is about pipelines. We really see a wide range of business and technical domains, from refineries and facilities management to distribution, which, as we know, includes pipelines and related infrastructure. And then there is logistics, transportation, all the way down to retail and real estate, which is the end customer touchpoint. Through this session, we hope to inspire new ideas around the value of location and GIS in this entire value chain. So, as we kick off this session, I will first discuss and present some trends that we're observing based on our own work, working with you guys. Given the breadth and scope of this space, for today's session, we have taken the perspective of 3 broad categories, with an interesting lineup of speakers and presenters whose stories build upon each other. First, we will look at refineries from a facilities management perspective, specifically around turnaround planning. Second, we will look at data management and collaboration in the context of stakeholder communications. And in the third session, we will hear about the world of retail and real estate. Through these sessions, we will explore the pervasive nature of location-based data across business functions and the ever-increasing need for insights. Our earnest hope is that these presentations will inspire new ways of thinking, or might I say even rethinking of how geospatial technology can add value in the downstream sector. As we go through this process, I would like to encourage you all to post questions as they occur during the presentation in the comment box. Please help us by referencing the actual section and/or presenter for your questions so we can tie those things on the back end. We'll go through all the presentations and we'll have an open live Q&A in the end where we will try to answer all of these questions as much as possible. So let's get started. First, I would like to take a few minutes to set the context for this notion of a digital twin and how location fits into it. In the downstream space and across business functions, really, there are different personas focused on critical outcomes for their business. They go through a variety of workflows and use different technologies in their own ways, but they all have one single goal in mind. And that is to go from data to decisions in the most effective and efficient manner. In other words, how do we optimize time to value? We then have a steady stream of new and emerging technologies and concepts coming into play in every aspect of this paradigm. IoT, cloud, big data have all matured to a point where a true digital twin is no longer an aspirational goal. We at Esri here see this manifesting itself as a geospatial digital twin. And that's because every aspect of your data has a location component or geography that's associated with it and data about that location. So what this means is every decision requires context and insight within the geographic framework. The expectation here is that this information is readily and easily accessible in real time. This brings us to the notion of location intelligence. We'll be talking about this theme throughout the whole session. So let's start by defining it first for a frame of reference. By definition, location intelligence is the entire practice of going from data to decisions, with a focus on insights, engagement, and user experiences. The user is the key here because at the end of the day, it's the people that get the work done. This means supporting for different user types enabled by an enterprise platform experience, supporting services to meet those individual user needs, and an extended partner ecosystem to meet the overall enterprise needs. At the core of all these concepts, however, is data. It always comes back to data. So let's look at three key trends that are driving the digital transformation around data and accessibility. The first trend I want to talk about is interoperability at scale. It's no longer a one-size-fits-all approach today. We see an ecosystem approach to technology investments. The interconnected nature of business is driving this interoperability at scale. Every aspect of the business is measured and tracked over time. Advances in hardware and compute resources have brought the cost of the storage down, making big data analytics easily accessible. Using a services-oriented architecture framework, ArcGIS can tie into virtually any data source and provide a rich distributed network of services that brings people together and helps with knowledge sharing. When it comes to analytics, there's really no longer a need to move data around from one system to another. Instead, we can bring geospatial analytics to your data systems and data stores at scale through the services-oriented architecture. The second trend is embedded systems. It's a natural evolution of interoperability, that is to embed geospatial technology inside other business systems. This has resulted in geo-enabling business systems such as SAP HANA, IBM, Autodesk, and of course, Microsoft. What this means to our customers is that they can now leverage geospatial capabilities natively inside these business systems that they work on daily basis without ever having to leave those systems. For the rest of the organization, this unlocks a seamless flow of data to other areas of the business, enabling real-time collaboration and interaction. And the third trend is the geospatial infrastructure, again, at scale. We all witnessed firsthand the move towards consumerization of IT. How we live and work has evolved in this new digital paradigm, and technology is a central part of it. By connecting and tracking everything, there is now more data that's readily available through different platforms. So as your organization's needs evolve, we can scale up or down the requisite geospatial infrastructure along with it, with flexible deployment options, whether we're talking on-prem or cloud, multi-cloud, or hybrid. You can almost bring a design thinking approach to the technology stack with the goal of delivering fit-for-purpose solutions and services across different business functions. So these three trends collectively come together to support this notion of a geospatial digital twin, which in turn drives location intelligence, leading to insights at the speed of business. So in this modern geospatial framework, ArcGIS is that foundation for your digital twin. ArcGIS brings people together in a collaborative system of engagement platform by interconnecting and integrating systems and processes and giving a new meaning towards decision making that's based on shared understanding. In practical terms, however, we can see that there are geospatial touchpoints across all aspects of the energy value chain, from production to transportation, from refineries to distribution and retail. All of this ties back to that singular vision of growing and making location intelligence pervasive across the enterprise. And the system of engagement for our users means simple, fit-for-purpose apps that can be accessed both online or offline or on any device. You'll see these reflected in the presentations today. So, coming back to this picture one more time, whereas digital twins are about virtual representations of the real world, GIS creates digital twins of the natural and built environments, and it integrates these models together. And these models are applicable to every aspect and segment of the downstream business. And if you happen to be an integrated energy company, it extends that connectivity all the way upstream. Before I introduce our first speaker, I'd like to have a quick reminder here about the Q&A. As you go through the presentations, please feel free to chime in and ask questions so we can capture them and tie them to the appropriate presenter. So to kick us off with our first presentation for the session, it's my pleasure to introduce Julia Kabalik from OMV in Austria. Julia is the GIS manager at OMV's refinery in Schwechat, Austria, where she's responsible for bringing information and value towards the refinery's core business objectives. Julia has a bachelor's degree in geoinformation and environmental technologies and a master's in spatial information management, both from Carinthia University of Applied Sciences in Austria. Having specialized in remote sensing, Julia has worked over the past 5 years for a company that gathers laser, thermal, hyperspectral, and imagery data from planes. She's now applying those skills at OMV in spearheading their vision of a geospatial digital twin. With that, Julia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much for your nice introduction, and welcome everybody to my presentation today about Turnaround Planning 2.0 at OMV Downstream Refining and Marketing. Today, I'm going to tell you about a GIS timeline. So we only started in 2019. What have we been doing since then, and where are our future plans? Then I'm going to tell you what is a turnaround, so about which topic I'm talking today. Then I show you how a typical planning workflow happened so far and how GIS helped us to improve that workflow. At OMV Downstream Refining and Marketing, we only started in 2019 when my colleagues decided to implement a pilot GIS and go with the Esri products. When in the first year, their main task was a data capturing. They did aerial imageries for all of our 3 refineries. We have one in Burghausen in Germany, one in Romania in Petrom, and one in Schwechat in Austria, where I'm located. The next step for them was to do a lot of survey for coordinate transformations. Each refinery has its own coordinate system. And when we look at Schwechat, we have 2 refinery coordinate systems in only one refinery. So as you can imagine, we had a lot of surveys and calculations to get the right coordinate transformations from the own refinery systems to the official ones. And as a last step, we have a lot of 2D plans and they needed to be reworked. because the plans were old and not really GIS ready. So these were the main tasks that my colleagues needed to do so that at the beginning of 2020, they were able to launch the GIS pilot for a handful of key users. In March 2020, I joined the OMV family as a GIS manager, and my main task in the first year were a lot of quality check and GIS evaluations, because as you can imagine, our plot plans or 2D AutoCAD plans were really old. They were good for the time being, but if we now have a high resolution orthophoto and put our layer over that, you can see a lot of differences. So we had, for example, a few buildings that were missing, a few buildings that have a completely new structure now, and sometimes also the plant and the equipment inside one plant was inconsistent. So we needed to go one step back and did a rework of this plan again. The next task that I had was I had no refinery background. So it was important for me to get to know the refinery way better and to have a lot of workshops with different departments to see where the GIS can be used. One department that I found out that can use the GIS without really a lot of content in it was the turnaround department. The only thing that they needed in the GIS was a high resolution orthophoto and a layer where they were able to edit things. So therefore, I took most of my power to this turnaround department and to see how we can optimize their turnaround workflow. One project that may also be interesting is a pilot started at the end of 2020 and will be finished this year in June, is a cooperation with a SAP HANA department. They are doing their work permit, their e-work clearance in the new SAP HANA, and they only have a basic map there with only a handful of information. So if they now set their pins to see where somebody is working, the map is really crowded and you can't really see where the refinery you are. So now we have implemented an interface with a geo-enablement framework where SAP HANA is now able to get our information from the GIS and visualize it in their e-work clearance application. So now they can really see the equipment, the technical places, and so on, and have a way better visualization for their work clearance. In 2021, so at the beginning of this year, we had a rollout of basic informations to all 3 refineries. Basic informations were streets, building, and safety and security objects. And we have planned a lot of pilot projects this year. So the biggest one may be the 3D pilot, because we not only have 2D plans of our refineries and equipment, but also 3D data, like point clouds, 3D models, and meshes. And we want to visualize all of this data within the GIS so that we don't need expert software or expert licenses or even a special education, that we can look at that 3D data. So this is one of our pilots this year. We have a second one with routing and navigation, where we are testing 2 different methods. We have one inactive navigation, where we are using QR codes, because within the refinery, we don't really have good GPS or Wi-Fi. So we're testing these QR codes. And within a magazine, which is a closed building, we are using beacons. So this is the second pilot. In the end of the year, we want to implement a 4D function. Well, this one is depending on the 3D pilot, but at least we want to have a 2D time slider. And one workflow that is following us for the next 2 years is to extend it 2D and later on also 3D content so that we get more and more information into our GIS. By the end of 2025, beginning 2030, our big goal is to have a digital twin for all 3 refineries from a documentational side. So we really want to visualize all available 2D and 3D data and make the data also intelligent. So we don't only want to visualize our 3D models, but also get information out of them or have interfaces to other softwares. So now I've used the word turnaround a lot. What am I talking? What is a turnaround? Well, a turnaround is a planned and regularly occurring engineering event that does either install a new plan, overhaul an existing one, or remove a redundant plant. And as you can see on the image below, there's a lot of planning behind it. So before we go into the refinery and touch anything, we have at least 24 months of planning before that. And within those long planning phase, we and the GIS can help the turnaround team. So how did the old typical planning workflow looks like? Well, we have a 3D printer plan that we print, we put it on a table, and within a workshop, we do some redlining. Like on picture 2, you can see these green squares. These are, for example, our containers. We have some green stars. These are our embedding points. We plan it. When the meeting is finished, we give that plan to a partner company. They do the redlining, the adaptation of the plan, and give the plan back to us. Well, as you saw on the last slide, these are 2 years of planning. So this process is not only happening once, but a lot of time. So we saw a lot of problems, and also the turnaround team said that these problems are occurring because it's time and cost consuming. So each redlining need to be paid, need to be given to the partner company. You can't see any ad hoc changes because if I miss a meeting, well, I don't know what had happened. So duplicate data can occur. I can plan my own containers when the other party is already planning. So there's no parallel project planning possible. And we need to check each time the redlining of the partner company. Have they done everything? Did they forget anything? And so on. So the main pros that we saw by switching now from this old 2D printed planning to the more flexible GIS side is that we decrease the planning time by providing predefined objects. Like we have an object catalog with cranes, containers, and so on. And instead of drawing each of these objects manually, we can drag and drop them. We can share the infrastructure between different departments because we have one single source information system for area planning, and that is our GIS. And with that, we also avoid redundant data because each and every OMV employee knows what's going on because everybody can see the data. And moreover, we also can increase the safety because we can visualize, for example, risky areas like X-rays. So you either know that you need to walk around it or that you need special work equipment. How did we do it at the OMV? Well, we now have a web GIS that is accessible for each and every OMV employee, but with a user management. So if we have, for example, confidential data, like where's a camera placed, not everybody should see it. But for the turnaround planning, every OMV employee should see the data. So where is something happening? Where did we plan something? But only a handful of people can really edit the layer and change something. We have those predefined planning objects with an object catalog where we have cranes, containers, embedding points, and many more. We have a start and end date as a must-have information, which is really important because we now have a lot of information in the GIS, a lot of planning for each year. And with the start and end date, everybody can see from when till when is an area reserved. So if I need a specific area from June till October, and I see there's a container, I can click on it and get the additional information that this container is only here till May. So I have no problem if I want to use that area starting in June. And in the future, we want to visualize all of this planning also with our 3D models, which you can see here on the right-hand side. We have a point cloud, we have a 3D models. We want to get all of those into the GIS and make them also intelligent. So not only visualizing them, but we want to click on it and get additional information. Well, that was now all theoretical. We have a few screenshots, but to really visualize you how easy it is now for a turnaround team, I also provided a short demo. So you can see here our GIS with our information. You can see the buildings, the streets, and so on. On the left-hand side, you can see the turnaround. So we have a predefined view. You can either click for each year to see the planning, or you visualize the complete one. Here now you can see we have different colored areas. So each type of an area has an own color. We have power distributors. We have security and health signs. We have lightnings and traffic information. And the deeper you zoom in, the more information will be shown to you. We just restricted it so that the map is not crowded at the beginning. If I now want to add something to my workflow or to the planning, I can easily go to the object catalog. You can choose here between security information, aerial information, pins, infrastructure, cranes, cleaning, traffic signs, and many more. If I want to add an area, I can either draw it manually, or can easily copy it out of the object catalog. Here again, have a few different options. I have double container, triple container, specific containers like smoking containers. If you go to the map, you have here a preview, so you can see how your container looks like, the size. You can give it a different name, like this is an office container. From the type, it's a normal double container, and it will be here for about 1 year. If I then place my container on the map, I have the possibility to rotate the object so that it fits to my needs. And if I click on Save, everything is directly stored into the GIS database. So if someone now opens the GIS, he can see my newly planned office container. If I now want to add a second one, I just go back, click again on double container, and you can see that the container is automatically in the same orientation like the first one. And I also have the possibilities to snap it directly to the first container so that we have a seamless planning. Again, I give this one a new name. It's OMV meeting container. So it's an OMV on container. That's why I give it also the type OMV container. This one is only here till October this year. So I enter that date, click again on Save, and you can now see that we have a different color. So through the visualization to the different colors, it's easy to see which area is here and to whom it belongs. If, for example, draw a more difficult object like a crane, we also have here some predefined objects. You can either check if it fits to the street, or you can just place it into the area you want. Again, you can rotate the crane in any direction you want. You can give it a name. I just keep it here the same name as it is a type. And then you need to give it a start and end date. By clicking on Save, again, it is directly stored in the geodatabase, and everyone can see it now. A few cranes have crane arms. So we also can add that by the function add a crane arm. We can decide where we want to put it. So either on the back of the crane, in the middle, or at the beginning. If you click on it, you can see this green dot, and this visualizes you the center of the crane arm. You can give it now a name, whereas I will just give it the same name as it's the type. Also for the company, you can say here to whom the crane belongs, but I just keep using the type, and then you can give it a radius of 50 meters, for example. Now the GIS automatically calculates you the radius, so you can either see the area where you shouldn't put anything like a container, or also if this crane arm reaches to the equipment that you want to check. Another thing that we can add are pins, for example, like editing points or working pins. If you click on the map, you can choose here between different types. We just use an embedding point. You can give it a height code so that everybody knows in which height he needs to work. You can give it a company name. So let's just say company A. And then we can choose between different stati. So open, in process, or finished. And again, we need to give it a start and end datum so that everybody knows from when till when there's something working. Now we have here the labeling. And if, for example, I am from company A and I say, oh, I'm going to work with this point, I can easily edit it, change the stati to in progress, click on Save, and as you can see, the dot now changes its colors. So even here we have different visualization for different stati and objects. If I'm now new, I was on holiday, go back and want to see what has happened in my planning, I can go to identify my objects, and I get the information that this one is an office container, that is here from the end of April 21 till the end of 22. I see it's a double container, so I know the size. I can give it additional comments, and I can see who created it and who changed it. So if I have any questions regarding that container or that crane, with this unique OMV identifier like Julia87, I know whom I need to contact. Well, with that said, I'm already at the end of my presentation. I hope it was able for me to make it clear how easy our turnaround, or in general, aerial planning has become. We can choose, or we can adapt these functions and layers to each and every project planning group at OMV. They get their own edit layer. they have their object catalog, their own user management, and then they already can start drawing. With that said, just a short notice, our legal disclaimer. So everything that I showed you today is strictly confidential and shouldn't be used without our notice. And with that said, I'm handing back to Suman. Thank you very much, and I'm looking to the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. You know, we've heard about turnaround planning from several customers as to how that is one of the most expensive areas of operations in refineries and manufacturing, to the point where shaving off even just a few hours can lead to significant cost savings. So it's very interesting. Thank you for kicking us off today. And we would love for you to come back at a future conference and share progress. Look forward to connecting with you towards the end of the Q&A session. I'd like to take a minute to highlight a couple of key topics from Julia's presentation. First, she mentioned going from point cloud to full 3D as part of their vision. Here's an example from an Esri business partner that shows the exact use case for a wastewater treatment plant. We can see in this example how terrestrial LiDAR scans provide high-resolution 3D data all the way down to individual pipes, nuts, and bolts. This then gets converted in ArcGIS Pro into a building information model, or a BIM. This provides a true 3D representation of your as-built infrastructure all the way from design to construction. Once deployed, you can overlay your work orders and other operational layers on top of it, making it a true system of engagement. Another point Julia touched on was around installation of new plants or overhauling existing plants. Here's an example of tracking a construction project that's in progress by integrating design and build with GIS to support QA/QC, resolving conflicts during the construction process. It can also be used as a briefing tool for key stakeholders, especially around project costs and financials over time. And lastly, Julia touched on understanding the timeline of events, or how things are progressing, rewinding back the clock, so to speak. This is an example of drone imagery where frequent flights provide a timeline of events that can be easily overlaid and visualized to observe change over time. Because this data set contains point clouds, this can be a valuable complement to the terrestrial LiDAR scans from the earlier example. So, in summary, there are three core value propositions that a digital twin can provide. First, because you're capturing and storing all this data, you'll establish a historical record or a baseline. Think of this as snapshots in time. Second, for the same reason again, you can better monitor your operational performance and KPIs in real time using dashboards. And third, using that whole data as a foundation, you can then begin to model existing business processes and workflows for predicting and optimizing future outcomes. All of these concepts are rooted in improving collaboration and shared understanding. On that note, let's move on to our next presenter to see how ExxonMobil is bringing these concepts to life from an offshore decommissioning perspective off the coast of Australia. As the Asia Pacific GIS lead, Jamie Lambert's focus is on solving business challenges from upstream to downstream using geospatial technology. Sitting right at the interface between business and technology, Jamie is currently leading digital transformation of field data collection programs, supporting decommissioning and emergency responses at both the local and global levels. With that, over to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Samant. For this presentation, I'll be talking about some of our recovery workflows supporting our offshore decommissioning operations. And please note, all data is for demonstration purposes only. So the offshore Gippsland Basin in Southeast Australia is a mature oil and gas basin with over 50 years of production. ExxonMobil are the operator of 24 facilities with over 1,000 kilometres of offshore pipeline and over 800 wells, many of which have already been P&A'd. Some facilities are almost 90 kilometres from shore in up to 400 metres of water. And to put decommissioning into context, a report by Advisian suggests there is more than $50 billion of decommissioning works to be done on Australia's offshore oil and gas infrastructure. So a subsea material register has been created to support some of our decommissioning operations. This is essentially a single database of debris and unused equipment categorized by location, type, size, weight, etc., with a workflow built around it. We're creating simple integrated workflows for non-GIS users, from data review and activity planning to field deployment and reporting. So why the Esri platform? The ArcGIS Online environment allows us to display our data spatially alongside other data sets for more informed decision making. We can create focused apps that allow us to engage a workforce of non-GIS professionals and enable them to be self-sufficient. It's accessible to third parties, and this can often be a huge challenge for some companies when it comes to working collaboratively. Offline capabilities for fieldwork, agile development of focused solutions. We can be very responsive and turn around updates quickly. An important aspect of this work was early engagement with the GIS team. This early engagement was critical in shaping the initial spreadsheet design and key fields. From the initial spreadsheet, we spatialized and geo-enriched the dataset in Pro, published it to ArcGIS Online, and did a mock-up of the dashboard and survey form. And using this data, we ran some desktop exercises. And I really encourage people to do this step. It gets you thinking about the possible scenarios you need to accommodate and can quickly highlight gaps in your data and workflows. So we incorporated the updates from the desktop exercise, exported the updated data set with the final table structure. Then the final hosted feature was built with Survey 123 Connect. And there are a few reasons for using Survey 123 Connect to do this. It can be quicker and easier to build your table, and your feature gets published at the same time, and also you have a survey. So once we appended the draft data back into the final data set, we could start building the final apps. At the same time, the customer continued to review the spreadsheet. So we had some parallel development going on, and once the spreadsheet review was complete, we deleted the contents of the final hosted feature, appended the updated spreadsheet data, and were ready to go live. Data was combined from multiple sources and multiple vintages collected by multiple service companies. Data wasn't captured with decommissioning in mind, so we're really transforming this data to accommodate our needs. Consolidation and standardization were the main tasks initially, and data prep was done in both Excel and Pro. Throughout the initial stage of development, the early engagement between the customer and the GIS team and the desktop exercises were critical as we moved forward. And understanding the requirements helped us design the attribute table to achieve better results. So attributes really drive your functionality. The subsea material register workflow can be split into two components: the office-based review, planning, reporting workflows, and the field-based recovery workflows. Data can be reviewed via a dashboard and work programs assigned with Web App Builder. In the field, summary reports can be used for reference, and the Survey 123 field app is used to update recovery status. Following this, summary reports can be generated for KPI reporting, stakeholder reporting, etc. So ArcGIS Hub is the launching point for all web-based activity. Accessible from the homepage of ArcGIS Online means all users have easy access to content without needing to save individual links to individual apps. This really simplifies accessibility and is one of the biggest advantages to using Hub. And Hub can be as simple or as involved as necessary and grow with the business needs. Story maps are a great way of sharing information. And in this context, we're using story maps for user guides. And there are two key benefits to this. We no longer have to send out documentation to third parties, and all users are looking at the same version. And apps can be launched directly from the user guides. And if you're online, they can also be accessed from the Survey 123 app in the field. Dashboards, as you would expect, are used to show a visual summary of the data. Data can be quickly and easily filtered through multiple elements. And I like to include a filtered record count indicator to help the user identify if there are any active filters. An embedded Survey 123 form enables editing of individual records, An example of this would be if an item was not able to be recovered in the field. The dashboard can be filtered to show records where recovery failed, and the survey can be used to update the weight classification, for example. Something I like to do with a dashboard is to increase the flash repeat count from the default of 3 to give you a bit more time to take in any changes and filtering that may occur when a selection is made. Web App Builder is primarily used for batch editing workflows with the Batch Attribute Editor widget. Records can be filtered by attributes and a work program can be assigned accordingly. And once that program is assigned, the survey inbox filter can be updated to return only those records assigned to that program. Data can also be exported through Web App Builder through the attribute table. Survey 123 Connect was used to author surveys, and as we are working with existing records, the inbox is the primary method for completing surveys in the field. Depending on how many recovery campaigns are active, multiple surveys all pointing to the same hosted feature may be in use, each with a different filter for the inbox based on the campaign. This ensures only the records that are part of the campaign are pulled through the inbox. The inbox is refreshed prior to going into the field, so the surveys can be completed regardless of connectivity. And you can edit the max record count property of your feature service if you need to pass more than 1,000 records through the inbox. The Survey 123 website allows us to create feature reports and summary reports. And with the introduction of summary reports, we're able to report on both total counts, selected records, and records that meet query parameters. And once you configure your template, it's easy to generate reports for management, KPIs, the field, and so on without requiring any data preparation or exporting of data. And you can create reports even if you don't use Survey 123. All you need to do is create a survey with your data to generate the survey form item. And then once you have this item, your data will be available in the Survey 123 website. One of the biggest wins from all this work is the customers becoming self-sufficient. And this is a big win for the customer as well as the GIS team. We also have multiple users, including third parties, all looking at the same hosted feature or a version of that hosted feature. And we are now looking at a complete basin-wide data set, and we can bring in other data sets to add more context. Focused, simple apps mean minimal training required. Fieldwork can be completed offline, and we can be very responsive to update and enhancement requests. And here are some additional resources: the Advisian decommissioning report, editing the flash repeat count with the ArcGIS Online Assistant, and updating the max record count of a feature service. So thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of this presentation. And if you have any questions, please bring them up during the Q&A session or feel free to send me an email. Thank you. And now I'll hand it back to you, Samant.
Thank you, Jamie, for connecting some dots for us there. Most any project across the oil and gas value chain is data intensive. However, decommissioning, I think, takes it to a whole new level, making it extremely critical to maintain data integrity, especially over such long periods of time. We're talking decades in this particular case. Your presentation, I think, clearly demonstrates how introducing the idea of ArcGIS Hub and field mobility into the business process can effectively bridge the communication gap among stakeholders. You talked about surveys, reports, apps, story maps, web apps. All of these can be key communication tools depending upon who you're trying to communicate with. In fact, I think we can even extend this back to the refinery workloads from Julia's presentation earlier and realize similar benefits. So digital twin starts with data management and enables data capture and further integration. With shared understanding as the aspirational goal, a system of engagement delivers purpose-built apps to the users. This is what we saw in Jamie's presentation. These apps help them do their jobs better by enabling them with actionable insights to make data-driven decisions. Thanks again, Jamie, and look forward to the Q&A session in the end. All right, let's now shift gears to further onshore and inland into the world of real estate and retail to explore how the same notion of data to decisions and digital twin is playing out in this space, where location comes in different forms, from analyzing markets to evaluating sites, but it all begins with understanding your customers first. Again, it comes back to the idea of people. If there's one thing the global pandemic has taught us, it is that change is the only constant. At a global level, these changes can result from factors such as supply chain disruption of semiconductors, which is causing a shortage of chips in consumer electronics right now. At a regional and local level, economic factors and social distancing policies are resulting in new consumer behavior, forcing businesses to respond with smarter and more informed decisions quickly as they adapt to this new normal. Successful organizations have long recognized that good data is what drives better decision making. Today, technology advancements give us new data that we did not have before, or often considered cost prohibitive. These include aggregated human movement data, streaming right out of our smart devices, social media data, real-time events. These are just a few examples. Enhancing your own organization's existing data with these other data sets through geo-enrichment provides additional location-based context. This additional context can drive better understanding, analysis, and decisions beyond what the original data alone may support. There are three primary capabilities with geo-enrichment. The first is called data enrichment. This is when you query specific attributes to join to a map layer for on-demand context about a place of interest. Think of this as a point in polygon analysis, for example. The second capability is demographic reports to dynamically analyze your areas or sites of interest for most places around the world. They generate different types of pre-formatted reports. And lastly, bringing all these analysis into data-driven, visually appealing, and intuitive infographic reports. For example, using content that's curated in ArcGIS combined with your own data, we can evaluate the market for new gas stations. Starting with demographics, we can look at household incomes, growth rates around different geographies, communities, and factor in many other criteria. We can then identify a handful of potential locations for further consideration. Field analysts out in the field can receive this information on their mobile devices and capture other relevant and more accurate on-the-ground information to enrich and enhance this initial analysis. As the organization iterates through this process of analysis, we can share such information in real time using easy to understand dynamic dashboards and infographics with key stakeholders that need the information. Dashboards can be very powerful tools for communication and understanding by providing quick ways to go from micro to micro in a matter of seconds. Whether you're interested in understanding your business performance more holistically, or you want to drill down to an individual store location, dashboards can play a very powerful role in there. Another example of dashboards is to understand the market and availability for acquiring new properties, or perhaps just getting a better understanding of properties you already own in relation to what's out there. By applying simple filters and querying capabilities, such apps can make large amounts of data easily and widely accessible across the organization. Core objectives in this domain are maximizing investments and increasing revenue. This brings us to our next presenter, Joel Glaze from ExxonMobil. Joel is the global real estate optimization lead for environmental and property solutions. His team uses big data solutions and geospatial technologies to maximize the value of ExxonMobil's global corporate real estate assets. As an attorney, mediator, and a business developer, Joel motivates and engages people across lines of business to find solutions to these big challenges around property stewardship and the environment. In this presentation, Joel will discuss how ExxonMobil is pioneering an innovative approach to real estate planning process across their different lines of business with a global vision. Joel, over to you.
Thank you, Sumant. ExxonMobil and Esri have a long history of working together. Colleagues of mine all across our organization are using GIS to find new and innovative ways to solve the challenges we face today. Many of you listening to me speak right now are also working on some amazing projects as well. All that to say, I am humbled to have a chance to share with you today. At ExxonMobil, we are using data to drive real estate optimization on a global scale. I'll be highlighting how new big data tools are reshaping the way we acquire, divest, and use land we own to deliver value. I work in environmental and property solutions in ExxonMobil, and we are proud to support our various business lines with their real estate, facility, environmental stewardship needs. As you can see from the infographic on your screen, EMPS is involved in all aspects of the property lifecycle. We're involved in the planning and acquisition of land, are engaged in construction and facility operations, and even work once operations cease and it's time to ensure our properties are ready for their next beneficial use. This broad exposure to how our company uses its real estate gives us a unique perspective to ask big questions about how to find new ways to optimize our real estate as an asset. We get to ask questions like, what does our real estate footprint actually look like? Or how can we ensure every property, regardless of where it's located, is achieving its highest and best use? You see, ExxonMobil has a very diverse global real estate footprint acquired over 100 years of operation. We own and lease thousands of properties across 6 continents. All of this land equals to terabytes of data spread across hard drives and file boxes throughout our company. This data has been typed on computers, typewriters, handwritten, sometimes even in different languages. On this land, we operate petrochemical refineries, office buildings, state-of-the-art laboratories, oil and gas and water wells, pipelines, and various infrastructure to support our upstream, midstream, and downstream operations. These properties are incredibly diverse as well, and they include land in urban and rural settings, flat and mountainous terrain, forested and arid lands, just to name a few. All of this land, every single one of it, has a unique story and purpose behind how it came into our real estate portfolio. In short, ExxonMobil owns a lot of real estate. When EMPS looks at all of this land, we think to ourselves, wow, the possibilities of how we can use this are endless. Reality is, not everyone in our company shares the same excitement. And I'm glad for that, actually. You see, each of our teams have their own specific focus area, a business driver that supports their unique value proposition to ExxonMobil and the world. Their priority is to ensure that ExxonMobil is positioned correctly to drill, refine, and move product at the best possible time. The decision made around conference tables and virtual meetings are therefore focused on their respective priorities, and the value of the associated real estate many times is brought up at the end of those conversations, if at all. Over time, this means that our surface real estate portfolio has become harder and harder to locate. Like many of you in large multinational companies can probably relate to, it became very challenging to keep line of sight, not only on our real estate, but also the full potential value that it holds. So 2 years ago, a team inside EMPS set out to change this. We began by pulling together a list of all ExxonMobil owned surface parcels. This was a monumental effort and we needed help. we turned to our friends in First American Data Tree, who provided parcel data and commercial attributes for millions of parcels in the US. We also turned to Esri. Their ArcGIS maps, an entire suite of applications, were a perfect platform that we needed to visualize, analyze, and share our findings with others. I'll talk more about this in a minute. By analyzing some of the 155 million parcels across the US, including regional and local government records, internal ExxonMobil files, and various other sources of data, we were able to build a tool to answer our corporate real estate questions at incredible speed. With this list assembled, we focused to value propositions like monetizing unused and underutilized real estate and asked ourselves, if we're not using the land today and we don't have plans to use it in the future, why aren't we turning this land into cash? This simple question seemed like a pretty good idea for ExxonMobil in 2020. Through big data analytics and relational modeling, we also began working to realign our portfolio of real estate to maximize its value. We are now able to look across all business lines, teams, and silos to make real-time recommendations, like when someone needs land in one business line for, let's say, a laydown yard, and someone else in a different business line has land with extra space, we can bring the two together. Finally, we began to view our real estate at a global level. With this new perspective, we're now able to deliver detailed real estate portfolio reports and analysis to our environmental and sustainability experts to support our company's effort to meet our sustainability goals. This is something every EMPS and ExxonMobil employee can be very proud about. Now I'd like to dive a little deeper into how our new EMPS real estate optimization approach works and discuss two specific use cases tied to acquisitions and divestitures. At ExxonMobil, we love data. So it's a natural fit for our team to answer our questions with data-driven solutions. So for each phase of the process, we kept asking more and more questions and gathering more data. What began as a journey to identify all of ExxonMobil's surface real estate very quickly evolved into ourselves asking, how is this land used and how is it could be best used? This led to proprietary categorizations for each of the parcels that we owned. This also opened the door for several conversations where EMPS could proactively begin to optimize and realign the portfolio and make recommendations, all while gathering more information and feeding it back into the tools. Over time, this database and associated analytic capabilities will only get smarter and smarter. With this global scale and diverse real estate portfolio, this work essentially gets more and more interesting every single day. So let's review a couple of use cases now. In the past, when an EMPS was asked to assist with a business line in finding new land for an acquisition, let's say a new location for a refinery, we assembled a team of people to head out on the road and start looking. We would take the key needs expressed by the business line, such as access to rail lines, pipelines, deep water, and we'd spread the word. For most of our business line uses, these property attribute requirements number in the hundreds. Using our new approach, we now have successfully piloted a nationwide querying application that, when fed data with the 155 million parcels and the key attributes that we are looking for, is able to identify potential site matches in seconds. We have been told that what makes this an industry-first application is that it combines both value and spatial attributes to return actionable lists of potential sites in record time. The time needed to identify, validate, and rank potential locations is now dramatically shortened. With our new data libraries and big data insights, due diligence and transaction times can also be reduced. And while we're far from the day when an acquisition can be carried out with just a few clicks of a button, the merging of technology, data, and our ability to communicate and take action at this new speed will only make this process faster. Divestment opportunities are also identified, ranked, and actioned upon much differently now than in times past. Having a centralized data repository for all of our surface real estate means that we can run commercial assessments and analytic models to filter our properties like never before. One of the key wins for this new way of engaging in with our business lines is that we're able to make data-driven recommendations for potential surplus opportunities. By identifying, validating, and collaborating from a centralized platform like ArcGIS maps and dashboards, we can now approach our customers with actionable lists that they can review and make decisions on, sometimes that very same day. One of the key advantages to ArcGIS maps is also the ability to load the exact data our experts need to review straight into the map layers themselves. Well, it takes a lot of time and effort to locate and aggregate all this data. The ability to support our commercial, environmental, and legal experts in their need to look at key property data is fundamental to our process. So here's how Esri's suite of tools complement our EMPS workflows. Data begins by being loaded into an ArcGIS map that is published using one of the many templates Esri pre-built into the system. Once opportunities are identified, many times we begin building our story maps to conveniently share property data in an easy-to-present manner. We use business analysts to provide key ranking and demographic data so that our opportunity lists follow our business value metrics. We use site suitability and void analysis to quickly identify opportunities, not only for our business lines, but for the customers that our business lines serve. ArcGIS dashboards are built and synchronized to our ongoing customer engagements so that our real estate stakeholders not only can stay updated and find the answers that they are looking for, but many times they can do that without even giving us a call. Finally, we monitor properties from acquisitions all the way through dispositions and beyond to ensure that real estate data is accessible for the next time that it's needed. Before I finish my presentation today, I want to take this opportunity to talk about something that is an important topic for our GIS community. I would like to talk about the importance of people-focused design. While it may not seem to fit into a discussion regarding real estate optimization, I see this topic as being a critical responsibility of all of us attending this conference today. When I say that we need to design our tools to be people-focused, I'm speaking of both user-centered design and deploying tools that include rather than exclude people. On the user-centered design aspects, I will just say that at EMPS, 90% of our user base are not GIS professionals. I truly appreciate how Esri has thoughtfully designed applications today that embrace a heuristic methodology that enable people with a desire to learn to build end-to-end solutions to address challenges we face in 2021. I also want to talk about the importance of intentionally building space inside our new processes that encourage those with expertise to collaborate and come to the table. With our EMPS real estate optimization tools, we do this by ensuring that our operational, commercial, environmental, and sustainability experts have opportunities to inform both our property rankings and also our validation processes. While we leverage the power of technology to grow, we must not forget that people, both in business and in our communities at large, deserve the opportunity to grow as well. In conclusion, EMPS is reimagining the way that we collaborate across silos, making big data analysis possible. This new market insight is enabling better and faster decisions supported by both the latest data and reports and the contributions of our ExxonMobil team's expertise. Thank you for the opportunity to share how Esri and ExxonMobil EMPS are making real estate optimization possible at a global scale. Now I'll hand it back to you, Samant.
Joel, thank you so much for for that thought-provoking presentation. I think your story demonstrates, if I think back to the earlier part of the presentation, 2 of the 3 trends I mentioned. First is interoperability, and second is the geospatial infrastructure at scale that leverages the true power of data and location insights. Thanks again, and looking forward to picking your brain further in the Q&A session in a little bit. So far, we have seen and heard a range of topics and challenges, all tied to location-based insights. As we discussed earlier, the global pandemic has intersected in interesting ways with the larger energy transition that is currently underway. These are just a few headlines from the last year, and we're just starting. When we look at how the global market forces are influencing and shaping the energy retail sector, this timely article from McKinsey from just about a month ago gives us some food for thought. It puts things in the perspective of cause and effect. While on the one hand, the pandemic has reduced fuel demand, on the other hand, it has also made a rapid recovery because of increased private mobility, which is actually driven by our own fear of infection risk. This means there are some significant changes to consumer behavior, presenting new opportunities in the form of non-fuel retail. This new consumer behavior is going to be defined by 3 new trends shaped by lifestyle choices and technological developments. Fresh and frequent, referring to consumers' tendencies to shop more frequently and more locally. The second one is delivery and on the go, which refers to the increase in online ordering of food and the rise of consumption outside the home. And the third is frictionless customer experience, which is about digital menus and contactless payment solutions. I'm sure all of us can attest to one or more of these trends as firsthand witnesses in our own ways over the last year or so. One company that is at the forefront of thinking about this and charting the path for the future is Shell Energy. As part of its energy transition plan in 2019, Shell acquired UK's first utility and switched its residential customers to 100% renewable electricity. A little over a month ago, Shell announced a smart device partnership with a company called Geo to better understand consumption patterns by location and using the insights gained from this to help with their own net zero carbon target. A big part of Shell's transition plan includes overhauling its retail operations to focus on sales of renewable electricity directly to households and electrical vehicle owners. Shell has laid out a fairly ambitious goal of increasing its retail sites, that is gas stations, from about 46,000 to 55,000, increasing its EV charging stations from about 60,000 today to over 500,000 in under 5 years. As mentioned in the McKinsey article before, Shell is also banking on non-fuel revenue in this initiative. To discuss all this and more in person, it is my privilege and honor to welcome Tony Battle, CIO of Shell Energy Retail, into a live discussion on the future of retail. Without giving away too much just yet, Tony has a long history, a long interesting career, which we'll get into, leading up to his current stint as the CIO. Tony is tasked with growing Shell's footprint in energy retail within 2 major European markets, UK and Germany. Tony, welcome, and we appreciate you spending your time with our extended PUG community today.
Hey, thanks, Sumant. Really nice to be here, and it's a privilege to be part of this event. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Of course, glad to have you. Tony, I want to first pick off of, we thank you for doing the video for the plenary. So I want to kind of go back to some of the comments you made there and start off with the first question. You have an interesting career over the last 20 plus years, delivering on mega projects, and you've had a customer-centric focus for the most part. I also understand you have a lot of history and background in the upstream side. Now you're in retail, where customer centricity is the focus pretty much. So I'm curious how your perspective has changed from when you were dealing with a different part of the industry whereas now it's retail?
It's a great question. Yeah, I've had to learn how to be customer centric. I think that's probably the biggest sort of self-awareness and takeaway. And I think in some ways, my journey, most latterly in the last few years of my career, is in some ways indicative of the transition that this industry is having to take, and the journey that it's going on. You're absolutely right, Samantha. My early part of my career was absolutely in upstream, in large mega program capital projects, delivering onshore and offshore facilities, from an engineering perspective. And my background is that I studied engineering surveying because I wanted to be a cartographer, but I wanted to understand the process of capturing data and the whole mechanics about how you measure the world and then transpose that into 2D and 3D. And that's absolutely what I started out to do. I didn't intend to go into the energy industry, but like a lot of us, I probably ended up there by, a journey of, taking different jobs and different career opportunities. But I found myself, when I left university, working as a surveyor, a topographic and engineering surveyor, at a time when that industry was absolutely going through what I call the first phase of digitalization. Survey crews, multi-person survey crews were no longer needed because one man could do the same job as previous with an automated total station or, intelligent instrumentation. And that took me on a journey of having to move from being a surveyor and capturing data to managing hardware and systems and generating information, which led me into information technology. And I spent the best part of the last 20 years working in upstream in large budget capital programs, from a concept phase all the way through to operations, principally around utilization of geospatial technologies and so on. In a very, very privileged position, in a very, very privileged industry with lots of money. And when we talk about customer centricity, I would put my hand up and say, no idea what that meant for all of that period of time. In fact, I probably even struggled, like a lot of people do, to actually comprehend and articulate what it meant to be close to the bottom line in that part of the industry, because you're so far removed from the sort of the retail side of things. However, saying that, I've been really privileged in Shell in being able to transition out of upstream into downstream and retail. And for the last few years, I helped Shell's retail business try and transition towards data-centric and customer-centric ways of working. And it's probably in that period that I've had to reform and reshape myself a little bit about what I understand customer centricity to be. I'm a consumer like what you are, and everybody will be on this call, and we all want value, we all want great service, we all want the things that we want at any given moment in time. And being in Shell retail really afforded me the opportunity to truly understand that, particularly around the non-fuel retail piece, which is a hugely competitive space. We all like to grab a coffee when we're on the road. Sometimes we get hungry. We like the convenience of being able to pop in somewhere and grab some groceries and things like that. And that's absolutely the space where true customer centricity comes to play. And in the last year, I've moved into a slightly different part of Shell's business, which again, I think reflects the transformation that this industry is in. So I now sit in the renewables energies solutions part of Shell, which is absolutely a retail focused entity, but sits in upstream, which in some ways I think reflects the the change and the dynamic of this industry as it transforms and changes.
Yeah.
There's no hard and fast playbook in terms of how we do these things. So again, I'm in retail, but I'm back in upstream, which is a bit unusual. And I'm in a part of the business which is very new to Shell, but again reflects the transformation and the need to move towards a different energy model. I'm in a part of the business where Shell delivers electricity and gas and broadband and other services to domestic consumers. So basically, it's the things that you need at home to power your home and also power your car. And again, that's taught me a whole new range of dynamics about a completely different market. It's very low margin, very heavily regulated, hugely competitive, and it's taught me, or it's consolidated for me, the attention to detail about understanding the needs of the customers. What is it that they actually need? What do they ask for? What can they get from us that they can't get from our competitors in a market where they can switch? I can move to another energy supplier because it's got a cheaper tariff, and that's the name of the game. So the differentiator for us around customer centricity is about how we truly understand what the customers need, how we transpose that into user experience and services, and how we utilize the data that we get by virtue of doing all that to get speed to market and quick to response to the customer, and ultimately demonstrate that we care for the customer and we give them what they want.
I want to pick up on one thread that you just mentioned, which I've been thinking about as we've been talking about the last few weeks and preparing for this session. We talk a lot about digital twin, as I talked about today. And in the work that as I'm absorbing the work that you're doing, I'm curious if you see in this retail space actually, let's back up. In the upstream space, we talk about assets as the starting point for a digital twin. And then you layer your IoT SCADA data on top of it, making it a living system, if you will. As I'm thinking about retail, it's us as humans or your assets, basically. And it's data about us that you're after to understand your customer behavior, customer profile, and things of that nature. What is your sense of digital twin, or is there even something called as a digital twin in this space, or what is the equivalent to that?
It's a great question. It's a really thought-provoking question, actually. I think the concept of a digital twin using that vocabulary isn't necessarily there yet. But I think the concept and the value proposition about taking what is effectively real-time data and putting it somewhere almost like a master data library where you can do secondary and tertiary analytics and create further insights outside of that real-time space it is absolutely a concept and a must-have. And I think that's very much a developing space, actually. So, you talk about people being the assets, absolutely. And that goes all the way back to customer centricity. They are the assets that we need to encourage to join us as a retailer, and we need to nurture them, we need to care for them, and we need to make sure that they don't disappear. But we have to find the mechanisms for sensing what it is that as assets they do. So where do they go? Absolutely a location-based thing. When they're at those locations, what do they consume? So you can assume a location is a retail site, let's say a gas station. It's going to be diesel, it's going to be petrol. Increasingly, it's going to be electricity. Particularly in that electricity scenario, you can assume that your asset is going to be on site for longer. So they're potentially going to consume other things, hopefully in the shop. So we have to sense and be able to collect data about what happens with those assets in those locations. Equally, we can assume that between those locations, and I'm talking specifically about mobility here, but there's also some kind of a consumption or some kind of a service offering that equally produces data. And let's assume that those customers or those assets are also consumers of energy at home, and they've got a location in terms of where they live, be it an apartment or a house, or maybe even a B2B scenario where they are an industrial or commercial consumer of energy, because we do both B2C and B2B. And we're also in a position where we want to capture data about those assets in those locations. And fundamentally, where we want to get to is the same aspiration that you could assume Amazon or Google or Apple would have about their assets, about their consumers, which is about being able to understand and marry up and amalgamate all that data from all of those sensors, be it in our case a retail site or a home or a business location, because fundamentally mapping that together allows us to get real insights about the individual or the business and the consumption and the needs and the behaviors, predominantly around location. And I think we need to do a lot of analytics and insights and interpretation in real time. But equally, I think there's a value, and getting back to the digital twin concept, there's a value about having a master data library that is also somewhere else that allows us to do deeper and different types of analytics.
That's a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask you about next, and which is about data. Shell is a global organization, and here we're talking data about human behavior, customer profiling, and in today's world, as data crosses borders, do you see any challenges? What is Shell's perspective on, data across borders, working in different countries? Are there challenges you're seeing in that phase, in that sense, and how are you addressing them?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Shell is truly a global organization, and as we try and transition as per the energy change, we want to do that across all the continents which we operate in. And your point about different markets presenting maybe different challenges is often a consequence of localized market needs, preferences, cultural differences, but also regulatory constraints. So you can assume that in some countries you can't necessarily realize the kind of ambition that I just talked about in answer to the last question of bringing disparate data sets together and amalgamating them so that you get a broad view of an individual customer, particularly in terms of location, in terms of movement. In some markets, there's constraint and restriction about the ability to be able to do that. From a broad vision, it would be a fantastic thing to be able to amalgamate data around consumers or individual consumers or commercial consumers on a global scale. So let's say you as an individual, you took a vacation and you went to Canada, or you went to Mexico, or even further south into South America. Potentially as a Shell customer, you might also continue to consume services in a retail capacity whilst you're on your vacation or whilst you're traveling. And it would be really opportune for us to be able to understand that and marry that up as part of our bigger picture about you as a consumer, so that we know in those locations you've got preferences and that you've made transactions, and we start to develop that insight relative to the intent that we can understand you and then maybe offer you additional services and actual propositions, which again is very much about customer centricity. And again, a very, very different space to where I was in upstream for the best part of 20 years, and probably where the majority of this industry still is.
Interesting. We're seeing a lot of fast-paced changes today. And as we were talking about, a couple of weeks ago, what is your advice or suggestion for a geospatial professional, a true geospatial professional that's out there and considering kind of diversifying into this space? Because we see that, as I mentioned earlier, it's an ecosystem approach to technology today, and you got to wear different hats at different times, and you got to be versatile. So having been in the industry, having started as a geomatician yourself 20 years ago, and to see where you are now, and you're in this driver's seat of looking forward with your work at Shell, but you also have the luxury of looking back your own career over the last 20 years. What would be your advice to somebody that's looking at you right now?
Yeah, I'm hugely passionate about this topic, particularly because, you know, I've been, as you say, in that geospatial fraternity, and I've evolved, and I knew I had a self-awareness and a consciousness that I probably had to evolve in order to sustain a career, because I could see the industry changing around me. And I think what it's taught me is that there's so much opportunity and so much potential for geospatial professionals to add value outside of what they maybe perceive are the boundaries of the career. And I think that is as true today as it ever was, increasingly actually, in the sense that everything is about data. You know, we are here together today because we're, you know, fundamentally in and around Esri technology. But I truly believe that the whole future of data is actually agnostic of any particular technology. Particularly in a retail space, data is the lifeblood of what we do. And there's so much necessity for capability, data scientists, analysts, individuals that truly understand the power of data, working with big data, complex data sets. And so much of that is about location. And I think there's a real gap in the capability within the sort of data scientist science world that I experience today in terms of transformation, coordinate systems, projection relative to accuracy and positioning. And I'm sure everybody on the call here will have deep experience about the consequences of what happens when a position is transformed incorrectly, when coordinates are misquoted, the wrong projection system is utilized. And in a world now where data and location are fundamental to all of the things that we've been talking about in the last 10 to 15 minutes, the need for understanding, appreciation, and care and attention for location has to happen from somewhere. And I think there's a great opportunity for geospatial professionals to be filling that gap.
Related to that topic, the intersection of business and technology, and we can bring the rest of the panel in a couple of minutes here. There's always this clear boundary wall, it seems like, between business and technology, and where GIS sits, sometimes under IT, sometimes in business. How do you see that changing or evolving at Shell, or just your perspective in the industry? Do you have like a preference of how things geospatially should be organized within organizations, thereby perhaps providing more opportunities, more diverse opportunities for geospatial professionals along those lines?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I have to reflect on, you know, where the core of the geospatial community sit within Shell, and it's still principally within a geomatics world. And I was chatting to some of my geomatics colleagues in Shell a couple of weeks ago, Bart and Robert. They might be on the call, not sure, but and we were talking about this challenge, about how geospatial GIS usage seems to still be confined or tagged to a geomatics community, a survey community, principally in upstream. And yet outside of upstream, even within upstream, but outside of upstream, definitely in downstream, there's so much opportunity, there's so much potential and scope for geospatial data, integration of data and systems with non-spatial technologies, And as we've just talked about, the opportunities for individuals. Somehow we need to pioneer and expand that universe outside of, with no disrespect to the geometicians, but there's so much play there, and so much education that needs to be applied. And in some ways, I hold a passion for it, and I feel, as I'm sure many people do, that I want to give something back. So, I've taken a journey which is, I'm still a geometician at heart, but it's taken me somewhere else. And because I'm still a geometician at heart, and because I can still empathize with how difficult it can be if you are in an energy company, maybe trapped in upstream, but there's a lot of opportunities, but boundaries. I want to be able to facilitate that a little bit. And if I can raise awareness and help people on their careers in thinking that there is the scope and the potential to step out of what they think is the boundary and realize something else, that would be a great achievement.
Fantastic. I think that is a perfect segue to, if we can bring the rest of the presenters, we can pick that up. Joel, Jamie, and Julia. Awesome. Looks like everybody's mics are on and we can hear each other.
Yep.
Okay. Joel, can you hear us?
I can.
Awesome. So hopefully you were paying attention to what Tony was saying, which reminded me of you. I wanted to pick up the discussion with you, Joel. You're talking about this changing role of a geospatial professional. And when I look at the work that you've done, and you touched on something near and dear to my heart towards the end of your presentation, which is about user-centric, people-focused design. And it's very interesting because you're not a GIS professional by training. And on the top right of my box here, we have Jamie Lambert, your colleague from Down Under, who is coming from it from another perspective. So I'm curious, based on what you heard from Tony and from the rest of the presenters, do you have any new insights perhaps that you can share?
Yes, I think, what Tony said, and even, I saw what Julia was talking about. I think there is a need to create tools that non-GIS professionals can interact with. And I think that creating a sandbox environment is one way, right, of creating a safe place for people to explore without fear of kind of exploding the whole system. I think that, we all love interacting with people, showing them a map and bringing in different data sets to draw a conclusion, seeing their eyes get wide and they get very excited. I think that's kind of the joy of GIS, right? Is that it's easy to do that, and I think we can't lose sight of that, because there's a whole, like I said, in our team within EMPS, the vast majority are not GIS experts, and I want to make sure that I do my part, just like I'm sure everybody else on the panel feels the same way, to bring them along, right? To let them learn in an environment where they can, but also respect the expertise that they have, because without respect for the expertise that they've gathered over their careers, our tools aren't going to be as powerful as they can be.
Yeah, well, very well said. On that note, Jamie, I made a note from your presentation earlier about the flowchart that you showed early on, which kind of talks about the process and how you went about coming up with this process. And picking up off of Joel, you're at that intersection point dealing with business, like a Joel, for instance. What is your kind of perspective on what Joel mentioned, and how do you see that business and technology intersecting? Especially, I'm sure this project that you did, it didn't happen overnight. You had to go through multiple iterations with different opinions and perceptions and all of that. So can you share some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a lot of opinions. But I think, one of the common themes that we've seen today is user-centric, and also, where GIS fits in an organization. And the same, as Tony mentioned, it's very similar to us at ExxonMobil, where GIS is historically sort of within the geoscience group. And there's a lot of opportunity outside of that we're I think we're starting to get after. And Joel's been doing a bit of work on that as well, and just sort of engaging that community. And it's really about having those simple workflows and those focused apps that you can start engaging non-GIS practitioners. And they need to be able to self-serve. And I think the more of that you can accommodate, then the more that message is getting out to other parts of the business. And for this little project that we did, we didn't have much trouble convincing management that this was the right approach. And I think one of the big reasons for that is that a lot of the management in the decommissioning area, I've worked with them in the past in other roles, in other teams that they've been on, and we've done some field data collection, digital transformation, that sort of thing. So there's a history of, while they don't necessarily understand the details of GIS, they've got a history of understanding the value of GIS. And so the more you can get that message out across the business and across different parts of the business and across different users, and sort of make people aware that they can engage with this data in a different way without having to have that vertical skill or that vertical knowledge. So, really the web and the mobile GIS platform help with that and help get that message out there and help getting people in touch with the data and sort of playing with the data. And, historically, and for sort of the data we're looking at for this decommissioning project, it's table-based data. We get a lot of PDF reports. And it's a very different way of looking at the data. And often you're sort of only looking at a piece of the data. You're not able to integrate it into a broader, bigger picture. So by making this transition and getting people more comfortable in this space, and also their understanding of what can be achieved, then you're really starting to engage more people and get that momentum and sort of break that historical boundary of GIS being in a certain part of the business, which is generally sort of more the upstream piece of it. And there's so much opportunity outside of the upstream. And most, and really the work that I do is all focused on those other pieces of the business and engaging engineers a lot. So I hope that helped.
Yeah, no, definitely. Which is a good segue to a question I had for Julia. Julia, your work with the turnaround planning, it's going to have an impact over a large swath of people, because as Jamie just mentioned, big picture, that's what you're trying to deliver through that. So if you haven't already started, I'm sure you will be at a point where you are interacting with a lot of people and how they want their solutions and apps configured and things of that nature. Can you speak to how you're addressing that, how you're going about that process at this point? I think Julia's on mute.
Here, it's now working?
Yep, we
Perfect.
can hear you fine.
Sorry. Well, we at OMV, we are separated in upstream and downstream. And upstream is using a GIS for, I think, more than 10 years already. And by us and downstream, it's quite new. So we only started in 2019. So it's getting more and more people get to know our GIS through presentations and key users trainings. But it's a little bit difficult now because we don't have that much data in it. We're just at the basic. And it's hard to tell people to do something with the GIS because they always want to find their things, their equipment, also the smallest parts and vessels and valves. So we are now focusing on the turnaround team because they are able to use it also without that many information in it. They only need the editing layer and defined user management. And now also the other planning groups found out that we have the GIS. And so we have already parallel project plannings into the GIS. And I'm trying with more and more presentations within the OMV, we're finding new key users to get to know the business areas that may use the GIS way better because I don't have a real refinery background. So everything, not only GIS is new for the people at the refinery, but also the refinery business is new for me. So we are, but I think we're in a good way through a lot of presentations and trainings to get more information and more people into the GIS.
I think an interesting point you mentioned was about upstream doing GIS for more than 10 years and downstream kind of just getting started. In my mind, I tend to think about patterns of use when it comes to GIS. You know, at the end of the day, it's about data and people needing to do something with the data. So given OMV's history in the upstream, do you kind of see any similar patterns and trends that you can perhaps replicate or leverage in the downstream space?
Not really, because the upstream is mainly focused on analysis. So where can they get new oil and gas? And we at downstream, we really have a 2D and 3D data that we want to visualize. We want to find things in it instead of checking for a plan in 2 or 3 softwares, but just knowing the name. So you need to know the name. We can go into the GIS, say, okay, I have the item tag number, or I know where it is located in the refinery, and then have the visualization. Then I can find the things and locate it. And in upstream, they
Gotcha.
mainly do analysis. So it's where we can work together is maybe in the 3D part, because also upstream is going into the 3D direction. And also we want to go there and visualize all of our 3D models in the GIS. So with a 3D viewer, data converter, those are things that we can work together.
Okay. One question on your work, Julia, was about real time. Is there I'm sure there are sensors of all kinds across the refinery. Is there plans on bringing that into this digital twin? How are you kind of laying the path for that going forward?
Yeah, of course. Also in the turnaround planning. So we now have the 2.5D. Then we want to have the 3D turnaround planning, and then the anti-4D planning, so that we really can visualize where's a container, when is it there, how does the crane move when there are coming vehicles in the refinery, where are they located? If we have external partners, can we ensure where they are and that they stay in their area, and so on. The first step is now with the SAP HANA that we have with the eWork permits, so that they receive our visualizations, our geometry out of the GIS into their visualization in the SAP HANA environment. In the next step, we are going to get their data into the GIS. And then the next step in the future, we also want to make interfaces to these refinery apps like Comos, Mars, ESMA, Explorer, where, as you said, we have a lot of sensors in the refinery, and they're also already collecting data. So it would be a shame if we don't use it in the GIS to visualize it.
Yeah. Joel, in your work, you mentioned refineries as well as one of the lines of business. As Julia is talking about her work, I'm kind of thinking, are there any dots? At least I'm seeing some dots that are connecting between perhaps your domain and the operational side of refineries. I don't know if you see it the same way.
Absolutely, there are real estate touches all business lines, because we all own or somewhat manage real estate in our footprint, and so there's a lot of interconnectivity between how we use our real estate, or maybe how even our customers use real estate, that we can leverage the work that we're doing here and what we're talking about to take advantage of. I know pulling together demographic data, pulling together traffic counts, all of the business analyst tools that Esri kind of has compiled is a great way that we can support not only our refineries or our fuels and lubes business, but also their customers, right? And making sure that we are helping them also be successful.
Great. Thanks, Joel. I do want to switch over to a couple of user questions that are popping up on my screen here. Tony, this one's for you. Are you at a stage that demographics and spatial analytics are helping to select new retail locations as you grow?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in our it's very easy for me to talk about retail and bundle everything together, but absolutely in our typical downstream retail business in the same way as what Exxon or BP or any other energy provider would have. We absolutely use all of those things to identify new locations. And you talked at the beginning some statistics about growing our retail footprint to 55,000 sites around the world. We absolutely do that by utilizing ESRI tools, spatial data analytics, and we utilize huge diversity of data sets, demographic, movement of commercial and domestic vehicles, footprint, all that kind of stuff. And I don't think we do anything different to maybe what everybody else in this community does. Pretty standard stuff, but extremely powerful and extremely insightful in terms of helping us to make the right decisions about where we put a retail site. And I think that will mature and grow as we start to move towards electric vehicles and the change in behavior that will drive for, people will need to pause whilst their vehicle is charged. They'll need to consume maybe a wider set of services and interact in a different way. So in many ways, that will drive for different considerations from the data and different utilizations of the systems and tools.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Along those lines, I have one more for you, which is actually I had this question, but I forgot to ask you earlier. How are you leveraging real-time consumer data in your efforts in supply chain or perhaps in marketing efforts? We discussed about the concept of human movement data and customer profiling, but this question is more specific about how are you actually utilizing, if at all, right now?
To a degree, yeah. And again, it's market dependent based on what you can do and what you can't do. But if you can consider that we have part of our mobile technology infrastructure embedded in some of the vehicles that some of the vehicle manufacturing industry produce. So, for instance, Land Rover, we have some app technology within their dashboard that allows us to do or facilitate the journey management, that allows us to facilitate prepayment. So if effectively you can pull up at a retail site, you can be in receipt of fuel without actually leaving the car, and also actually having to make a transaction in the retail site because it's all done via the vehicle using APIs. And that's absolutely driven by the vehicle transmitting information to our technology about fuel consumption, about the remaining fuel, about the proximity and the location of the next Shell retail site, about information on the forecourt about how busy that retail site is, and the availability of pumps, which then which allows for individuals to make decisions about, should I fill up at the next retail site or should I wait for another 20 miles down the road where there's more availability and I'll be able to get in and out quicker. So we're in that space. It's very much market driven. Yeah, it's a whole new world. It's right on the very edge of downstream, right on the very edge of retail, right on the very edge of data.
Interesting stuff. By the way, if you guys have any questions for each other, please feel free to. Doesn't have to be me asking the questions. So Joel, Jamie, and Julia, please go ahead. I'll just look up a couple of quick questions here. We have one for Julia. Have you considered field apps in the refinery, leveraging GIS and services you have built?
Yeah, we're not using it now, but we plan it for our inspectors that go outside in the refinery for checking equipment. So if they have their safety walks out there to see a problem, they can use the field app, they can make a photograph, write a comment, a text, and then it pops up in the GIS. So we do plan to use that, of course, yeah.
Very cool. Related to that, have you had the chance to capture before, after time and effort metrics for the new turnaround workflow tools?
We did it, and we have benefit.
Nice.
So,
Joel, Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah,
No,
this
go ahead.
planning phase, it's about 2 years, as mentioned in the presentation. And
Right.
it's way easier for them now that they plan it in one single source system. Everyone can see it, even if you're not in the workshop where they plan it, you can check it afterwards, and everyone is up to date the whole time. So it's
Okay.
really improving the workflow.
Okay. Joel, question for you. Are you building your own story maps, dashboards, business analyst workflows, or via your GIS team? That's an interesting one.
So we're using the templates and building our own and creating our own. But our GIS team obviously can support us as well. But most of the story maps that we're using, it's our team is building it themselves.
Okay. Another one related to that is you mentioned people-oriented design. And the question is, has that really shortened the design, build, and delivery timeframes for your products and services within ExxonMobil?
Absolutely, and in some instances, right, we are able to kind of deliver what we either have learned that our users need, and so we kind of bypass all of the world of the possible, right? That a lot of times you get involved with trying to put out the absolute best product or tool, and you end up spending a year, right, developing this great tool that really could have been released at version 1 and answer one question and get usage and then develop as you go. And so we kind of take that lean approach to designing and implementing our maps and dashboards. And if we can solve one real problem, if we can save time in one real solution, we go ahead with it, right? And then we tweak it as we go. And that's not necessarily always kind of a tried and true IT approach, but it's worked for us really well.
Okay. Well, that reminded me of Jamie. You mentioned agile project development or management. So you're both our colleagues at ExxonMobil. Does that ring a bell? Does that resonate with you in terms of how you approach catering to your customers within Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can run into a lot of problems if you try and deliver the ultimate, the 100% solution. And a big part of that is how long is that going to take? So by the time you have that ready, I think the customer's already moved on. They've found another solution or another way. So you've got to be fairly quick. And the other piece of that is that it's how much you understand of what their needs are and how well they communicate those needs. So I've worked on projects where we'll just get something out there, and also with the Esri apps, you can be having a Zoom meeting with someone, and they can be talking about your dashboard and say, "Oh, it's really great, but I'd like to see this or that." And while you're having that conversation, you can make some of those updates, and that's quite impressive. And I think that engagement helps with uptake when the customer can see that you can develop dynamically. That's a real win instead of waiting 3 months or something for an update to come. They're just, whenever there's something that comes in, you do the update and push it out. And even if people are in the field, we've had people in the field call me up and say, "Hey, I'm trying to do this and I'm not able to." And often it's just a simple fix. So you can update the survey, push the survey, they can download the update, and then off they go with no real interruption, no real downtime. So there's a lot of value in getting whatever that product is out early and into the user's hands and letting them come back with the feedback, because there's always going to be something that you've missed, and that could be could just be a case of whoever your customer is doesn't know how to communicate that need, or doesn't understand they have that need yet until they go through that process. So I think that agile development, that's it exactly, and they don't understand the capabilities of the technology. So you've got to give them something to play with, and they've got to use it, and then you can make those updates as they come in, and that way they're not waiting for a tool.
Yeah. Yeah. Tony, I want to pick up on that point back to you, because I'm sure in your career you've done your fair share of what we're talking about here, but now you're an executive and you have a large organization that you oversee. And I also heard you say that you empathize much more with the geospatial community just based on your background. How do you see it at Shell? How do you have any kind of process, methodology, things that are in place to help advance and fuel innovation?
Yeah, I was just listening to the conversation and just reflecting a little bit on how difficult it can be to satisfy the user community's needs, which are often immediate. You know, we want a development now, we want some kind of app enhancement, or configuration done to an existing site or whatever, and there's always an immediacy of requirement. Everybody wants it yesterday, and being able to manage that in a large organization that is absolutely digital. I mean, we are an energy retailer, but principally we are a digital organization. Everything that we do faces off to the customer in some kind of digital manner. And to support that, basically a third of the company organization is technology. And for me, that's about 400 people, which are predominantly developers and analysts. But that doesn't necessarily satisfy the demand. I can't necessarily get things quick to market. Yeah. So one of the initiatives that we're pioneering in Shell is something called DIY, which is enabling our user communities to be empowered to do a degree of coding and configuration and development themselves within certain applications and systems, within the parameters of being safe and controlled and sustainable. So if you can consider that, we try and encourage our non-tech users to learn Python and to develop the skills where they can actually go and just create things for themselves and actually relieve some of the pressure in the backlog of, I need this development, and you might be 100 in the list. And and we're finding that is an extremely appreciated approach. It's a bit innovative, and you could argue it's a bit risky, but within the right constraints and the right parameters, we see value being realized. And I think that's a good example of maybe, again, where we could encourage our user communities in a geospatial sense to partner with some of our geospatial professionals and just migrate or transpose some of that knowledge to broaden the awareness, but also enable others to be able to do things for themselves.
Fantastic. I think that's a really, really good insight, and we are right at time with that last question there. I greatly appreciate you guys coming in, and especially for the audience may not realize, but Jamie is it what, 6 a.m. Jamie, your time at this point? He started off at like 4 a.m.
Yeah,
so
7 now. So I'm
really
ready to go to work.
You already got your 2 hours in anyway. So thank you so much for coming in. Julia, fantastic presentation and great insights. Joel, thanks as always. And Tony, it's been an interesting experience for me personally over the last couple of weeks as we've been preparing for this session. And I know I started the session by talking about a paradox in downstream and how do we define downstream better. Just based on this experience, I think I can tell you that I've gotten a lot more clarity on thinking about things. And I really hope the audience that's watching this today, they feel the same way and they got a lot out of it. Once again, thank you all so very much. Really appreciate your time, and please enjoy the rest of the conference.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Best of luck,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.